If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free, on the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring to Erin across the sea. On the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring till Erin's fair shore I'd see. If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free. Oisin was a son of Finn McCool, and Oisin loved to hunt with horse and hound. And early one morning he found himself hunting with his father's two favorite hounds, Bran and Skule. But when they came to the top of the hill, there in the valley, he saw the most beautiful snow-white deer. Ruff, 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 ruff. The hounds gave chase through bog and fen, over hill and dale. But whenever they came to the top of a hill, the white deer seemed to disappear. The hounds put their nose to the ground, picked up the scent, and off they went. Soon they came to a quiet bay. And just as the fairy mist blew in from the sea, the white deer leapt into a bush, and it disappeared. And in the next moment, the following breeze blew the mist away, and standing there was not a snow-white deer, but a snow-white stallion. Silver and gold braided into its mane and tail, silver shod hooves, and holding the reins of this steed was the most beautiful woman that Oisin had ever seen, in a gown of green, embroidered with rubies and pearls. And she introduced herself. She said, "I am Neve, the princess of Ternanog, the fairy realm, and I have watched you grow from a wee young lad to a strapping young buck, and nothing would make me so happy as to call you my man. Will you come with me to Ternanog, the Isle of the Ever-Young, where time does not exist?" Now I have to pause right here and ask all the young men and not so young men, if the most gorgeous girl you ever saw invited you to go to the land of the Ever-Young and be her man, how many of you would say yes? If your wife wasn't sitting beside you. Actually, one time I was telling this story, and this gentleman, he put his arm around his wife and said, "She already asked, and I already said yes." He got lucky. Now Oisin had grown up with the tales of Ternanog. Many a night he lay abed dreaming of the Princess Neve. Of course, he climbed down off his horse. He crossed the strand. He fell to one knee upon the sand, and he took her hand. And he said, "Nothing would make me so happy as to be your man." She climbed onto the white steed, and he leapt on to the horse behind her. But in that very moment, his father, Finn McCool, and the band of warriors, the Fianna, they came riding into the bay. And when Finn saw his son, he cried out, "No, don't go. I fear that if you leave, I'll never see you no more." But Oisin had fallen under a fairy spell, and he did not hear his father's cry. As the white horse turned to the sea, it shook itself 3 times as it leapt from sand to surf, its silver-shod hooves touching the crest of each white-capped wave as it raced across the sea, faster than the wind at its back. And even at this great distance, Oisin could see the fabled Isle of Ternanog, the Isle of the Ever-Young. Great flocks of birds seemed to darken the sky. Huge herds of cattle grazed on the hillside. Salmon fairly leapt from sea to shore, crying, "Eat me, eat me." Once more, the horse shook itself 3 times as it leapt from surf to sand. It entered a grand boulevard guarded by giants. But Oisin, being a bit of a warrior himself, he knew, looking into their eye, they were friend, not foe. And when the giants saw their Princess Neve, they parted and bowed and cleared a way for them. Eventually, they came to a castle even grander than Tara, Finn McCool's castle. And a little elfish boy with pointed ears and pointed toes lowered the drawbridge, took the reins of the horse, and guided him into the castle grounds, where the king and the queen of the fairy realm awaited their arrival. Now Oisin, knowing a thing or two about court protocol, he climbs down off his horse. He offers a hand to Neve. He crosses the cobblestones, and he falls to one knee before the king and queen. And he says, "Nothing would make me so happy as to have your daughter's hand in marriage. I ask your permission." The king laughs and says, "My daughter will have her own way." And he grabs the hand of Oisin and lifts him to his feet. He grabs the hand of his daughter and he clasped the two hands together above his head and he said, "Let no man tear asunder what true love has brought together. As the ancient prophecies hath foretold, I declare you husband and wife." And with a snap of his finger, a band appeared all the way from Ireland. And a feast was spread. How many of you brought food? Give them a round of applause. And there's some fine Irish whiskey in a flask. Ask me later. And the celebration lasted for 9 days and 9 nights. And every day was more glorious than the one before it. And Oisin fell deep and hard into the sweetest wedded bliss. He passed his days hunting with horse and hound. And he passed his nights in his true love's arms. And what happened there, I'll leave to your imagination. Except to say that one morning he awoke before the sun. And he saw the smallest little shamrock. And as the first rays of light came over the horizon, it struck a small dewdrop. And the curved surface bent that ray of light, and an even tinier rainbow was made. And for a moment, the spell was broken. And Oisin remembered home. He longed to go home, to see his mother and his father. "If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free, on the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring to Erin across the sea." He went back to his wife, and she tried to dissuade him. But when she saw she could not, she said, "The white steed knows the way, but promise me this, you shall not dismount. Swear to me, you will not get down off the horse. Promise me true, you will not touch the earth, for if you do, you cannot return to me." He said, 3 times you ask, 3 times I vow. I miss you now before I go, but go I must. And he climbed on to the white steed. It raced across the sea. But when it returned to Ireland, everything was different. The once mighty race of Irish men and women seemed half-starved and bedraggled. He searched all day for his father's castle, and he could not find it. He saw an old woman hoeing her praties, her potatoes. He said, "Where's Finn McCool, my father, and the Fianna, the band of warriors?" She said, "Finn McCool, it reminds me of a story my grandfather told me when I was a wee lass. It's been 300 years since Finn McCool ruled Erin shore." And it began to dawn on him. What he thought was a day in the other world was a year in this. And the year or so he thought he had been gone, 300 years had passed. He found his father's castle. Tara had fallen into ruin, thorn and thistle grown throughout. He saw 2 young men straining with the weight of a huge keg of ale. He rode close, and with one hand, he grabbed the keg and he tossed it into the back of the cart. But with the weight of the keg, the strap on his saddle snapped, and the saddle slid, and he tumbled from the horse. And the moment he touched the ground, he aged 300 years. The young men looked on in disbelief as they saw the strapping young buck become a withered bag of bones. Just then, bong, 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 they heard the church bell chime, for St. Patrick had brought a new God and a new religion to Erin shore. Oisin said, "Take me to the sacred ground for a proper burial. I fear my time is short." The young men lifted this bag of bones into the back of the cart, and they took him to the cathedral where St. Patrick himself greeted Oisin. And they passed the night trading tales of the glory days of Ireland. And the scribes wrote down all of these stories so I could learn them and I could tell them to you. And you could learn them too. And you can tell them to your children and your grandchildren. And when they grow up, they can tell their great-great-grandchildren too. So 300 years from now, we'll still recall the glory days of Ireland. If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free, on the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring to Erin across the sea.